iTiS Well of Worship Fellowship. iTiS is in truth and in spirit, Well of Worship. It's just a fellowship, mainly online, but also meets physically on Sunday. And we welcome everybody here, the skeptics, the doubters, the atheists, the agnostics, the believers, the religious, the non-religious. We welcome everybody because we believe the subject of our focus, which is God, can be debated from many angles. God is quite complex, as you can imagine. So we believe in listening to every point of view, agreeing on some things, disagreeing on others, but it is well. So if you're free on any Mondays, we normally have a Q&A session, topical Q&A. So yeah, between 6 and 8 p.m. East African time, if you're free and you can join in, we welcome you. If you're listening to this one on YouTube, we'll always record whatever we discuss here, not just for future reference, but even for those who are not able to join in, but also most importantly, for you to actually disagree with what we say here. So we don't necessarily record so that you agree with us. No, we like sharp disagreements. We don't pull out pounders and blows. No. We like disagreements. So if you feel something we say or record here is not acceptable, please feel free to disagree in the comments. You can inbox me, the moderator. I'm happy. And of course, if you feel there's any subject we should discuss here, especially for Monday, which is our Q&A, then feel free to inbox me as well. Thursdays, we reserve for what we call social topics. And sometimes we allow politics in there, but for Monday, we don't do any politics. We just focus on what is the subject at hand. So today's discussion was, if I may give a little background, was initiated by my brother who's online, my brother Musazi, because last week I inboxed him and asked him to suggest any topics he feels we can discuss. And he got back to me with a quite very interesting question. Let me just pull it up briefly, if you may allow me. Yeah, but the question was really about, in summary, it's the topic of the day, which is God's moral authority, if you like, and then the whole equation and problem of pain in the world. So, if I may quote you, sir, verbatim, you asked, I have a following question. If an atheist woman miscarries, does her 6-month-old fetus go to heaven while the mother eventually goes to hell? I guess that's from the background of children going straight to heaven. Okay. If so, is that fair to the fetus or to the mother? Okay. Are conjoined twins still attached in heaven? What if one was a good Christian and the other was an atheist? So those are some of the questions. But like I said, for us as Christians, this just falls within what we call the moral authority of God. Basically, does God have the moral authority to even set a standard for the world? What does it even mean for God to have a moral authority? If morality comes from God, does that mean all his actions are inherently good? Okay, these are some of the questions we want to tackle other points of view. Are there moral standards that exist independently of God? Because many people actually say, I don't need God to be moral. I can be moral without God. So are there certain standards that exist independently of God? And then, of course, we shall probably go into how the different religious traditions define God's moral authority. And then this one is also one of the most difficult ones. Does God's justice always align with our human conception of justice? Because in our humanity, our concept of justice is tit for tat. You do this, you get that. Okay, so does that align with how God operates in his morality code, if he has one? Okay. And then, of course, the big one, how do we reconcile instances of suffering and pain and evil with the idea of a morally perfect God? If God loves all of us, why is there pain and suffering? You know? This one I asked earlier, can morality exist without belief in God? Or is divine authority necessary for moral order? Okay. Yeah. So that's what we're going to be discussing in general. The whole question of morality and God and even pain. So, Musaz, I want to first give you a chance to first of all expound on your question. I know it was very brief in the chat, but if you may just
Thank
expound
you very
and
much.
give some sort of background.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Well, I asked the question because I have very many questions about the existence of God and the prevalent belief that after we die, we renew kind of, that death renews life. So you don't lose the life that you have after death, but in a manner of speaking, you renew your life. And that's why I asked the question, if an atheist woman miscarries, does her 6-month-old fetus, it could be 9 months, even 3, 2, 5, 6, 7, but if she miscarries, does the fetus go to heaven while the mother eventually goes to hell? How do we know that the fetus goes to heaven if that's the case? If the fetus doesn't go to heaven, how do we know? If the mother goes to hell, how do we know? If the mother does not go to hell, how do we know? And there's another interesting part of that question it's about the conjoined twins. There is a very good example I want to cite. Unfortunately, these conjoined twins died way back in 2003. They were Iranian conjoined twins. They died in their late 20s. A lot had been done before their death to separate them. And in fact, they died in Thailand when there was a big team of doctors that had undertaken the exercise of separating them. And unfortunately, they died. So imagine one of them was a Christian. In Iran, they don't have Christianity, but for argument's sake, let's say one was a Christian and the other was an atheist. How, when we think about heaven, how do they live together attached? In fact, are they still attached because they both passed away? And we've had many others in Uganda that have passed away. Are they still together? Are they conjoined as we know the word? So these are very difficult questions because we do not know how to communicate with God. We say for believers at least that when you pray, God does listen to your prayer. But that is just an opinion because there is no way you can measure the fact that God has listened to your prayer. It's not like the kind of communication we have these days. I am speaking to you now. You can't hear what I'm saying. If I don't speak to you, I can email you. I can send you a WhatsApp message. I can contact you via Messenger on Facebook. There's any number of ways we do communicate. But when it comes to religion, people believe, religious people. I'm not one of them. And I've previously said on this platform that the believers have the right to believe what they believe. So they believe that when they pray, they communicate to their God. Unfortunately, we can't, through this communication, ask the questions that I am asking now. And there are very many. For example, there's another one about sex, which is the which is how we begin life, because everybody here started life after their parents had sex. And everywhere you look, you see millions of people, and all of them started through sex. So you have to ask, is heaven, as religious people believe, can you have sex in life? So it's not just these questions, but there are very many others.
Thank
Now,
you.
before I hear your views, because this question I asked for members in this group to share their views, to give me their answers. Before I
Can you
hand
guys hear
over to,
Musazi or it's just me?
is there is there a problem?
You kind of broke off.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we lost you. We lost you somewhere.
Is it better now?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. So I was saying that before I hand over the microphone to others to give me their views, answers to the questions, the problem we have when we ask these questions is that there is no objective way of getting real answers, convincing answers. Because if somebody asks, as I've just asked you, do people have sex in heaven? Because it's something that they engage in when they are alive, and it's the reason you have 8+ billion people on this planet. So after death, and people go to heaven to meet their creator, do they still have sex? And if they do, how do they have sex? So for now, that's all I have to say, and I want to hear your thoughts about the questions I asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Musazi. Gospel Ninja, is your network good? You said earlier you're on the move. Are you home now?
Not home, but my network should be good.
Okay.
I
Do you want to
realized I
attempt?
couldn't get home in time.
Let me give you a chance before your network drops off. Do you want to respond to Musazi?
No, it won't drop off. Musaz has raised many areas of concern, and thank you very much. This is a question that is very dear to my heart because it has many layers, obviously, but you've brought in context, so which helps to perhaps narrow in the specific. Because when you talk about suffering and pain, that is very broad, and you could be talking about Congo right now. You could be talking about some child who hasn't gone to school because the parents don't have money. You could be talking about someone who never saw, who up to now hasn't accounted for their Kitezi relative, who must have been buried off in the landfill. You could be talking about a lot of things. And you brought in context and talked about the conjoined twins, or somebody who had a miscarriage. And a miscarriage is at any month. You cannot just, whether 6 or 7. Last year, I was involved in burying of a 7-month fetus. It was what is it called? Stillbirth. It was a stillbirth, and it is life. As a Christian, I believe that life is life at conception. So when there is a conception, I believe life has started. Even then, I'm only talking about biologically. But God, as a believer in God, and I'm going to only represent that view. I believe that life does not begin by parents having sex, but God planned life. God intended life, and there's no life that happens accidental. And I dare say, even when there is a rape, even when there is what you'd call just having fun, okay, So we might be thinking that people who are having fun, it's okay. Oh, it's a bad thing when someone conceives out of rape. All of them are not planned, are not intended, but still life comes out of them. But yet, people can be married in the confines of marriage and having sex for reproduction, and either don't have a child or get pregnant, and things go bad. Either they have a miscarriage or they have a conjoined twins, they have conjoined twins, and as you said, before they can get separated, they die. But even when they're conjoined, faith is not passed on like that. So the issue of the afterlife, because life begins with God and ends or continues with God and in God. That's what I believe personally. On the flip side of the naturalistic worldviews, life begins with nothing. So if you end up as conjoined twins, that's a disaster of nature. And so whether you get separated or not, that's your fate. And therefore you end up in nothingness anyway. That is not of the worldview that I hold. I hold a worldview where any life, male or female, whether you die at 1 month or you don't even see the face of earth, as long as God has given you life, you are life. You are human. You are a being. And your age, obviously, for us in Uganda, who work with the Gregorian calendar, you are born after 9 or 10 months in your mother's womb, and then we begin counting your age. In some places, actually, when you're born, if you're born at 9 months, you are 9 months. And then within 3 months, you're 1 year. They begin celebrating. You know, some of you may be aware of like Ethiopia and other places where such life is celebrated that way. All that to say that life, if we bring in God and believe in God, and the moment we allow God in the picture, then we cannot choose and pick which one is true about life as far as God is concerned. So we're going to use two texts in the Bible to make a case, the kind of case I'm thinking about. One is with Abraham, as he's debating with God about Sodom and Gomorrah. And God is telling Abraham that he's going to destroy those two cities because there's no one who is godly. And Abraham says, what if there is 50? God says, Genda, if they are there, I will spare the city. What if there is 10? He says, go. If you find 10, I'll spare the city. But one question that Abraham asks after contemplating says, if God is just, won't he know to do what is right? What does that mean? But if a baby is in the womb and they don't get to see the face of the earth, and they never live to confess Christ as their Lord and Savior, God is just. If God is just, he will know to do what is right concerning that child. I am a priest, and I recently baptized my kids when they had already confessed their Lord and Savior. And I did not baptize them as infants because I have
Can you guys hear Gospel Ninja? He seems to have dropped off.
I think so, yes. I can't hear him.
Gospel Ninja, we
sorry,
lost
somebody tried to
you.
call
If
him.
you can hear.
I'm sorry, somebody tried to call him. Sorry, somebody tried
Okay,
to call him. Am I
continue.
back?
Yes.
Now saying that baptism does not draw kids near to God. So we say that when a baby is born, we baptize them just in case they die. Then they are potentially, God will have mercy on them. Baptism does nothing. God is the one in his mercy knows what is right. And I'll add another text. David commits adultery with a woman called Bathsheba, a wife of a man called Uriah, who was his frontline soldier. David panics. David sets up Uriah at the front line. Uriah dies. The woman is pregnant. She gives birth to a boy. And God tells David before even the boy is born that he's going to die. David pleads with God, have mercy, fasts, refuses to eat. The boy is born. Elders join him to fast and pray. The boy still dies. What Nathan had told David was, God said the boy is going to die. It doesn't matter what you do, whether you fast or not. So after he had fasted and the boy had died, David picked himself up, went washed up, went dressed up, went to the temple, worshipped God, went home, ate food. Simply that he couldn't change what God had said he's going to do. Finally, friends, if God exists and he created us, there is no life that is not in his hands. Whether you're 100 or 1 month, whether you're 100 years or 1 month. Also, there's no one who, if you get the chance to live in this world, that confesses, that sees their sin and accepts their Lord and Savior, that Jesus is Lord and Savior, that will not meet mercy even on their deathbed. Jesus tells a parable of guys who went, a master who was hiring workers. And some came in at the 3rd hour in the morning, others came in at the 6th hour, others came in at the 9th, others came in at the 11th. Jesus tells us in that parable that at the end of the day, the paid master, paid all of them the same. Jesus is driving at one thing, telling the Jews that while for them they got the gospel first, if they responded immediately, they get to benefit from God's mercy. But even if the Gentiles receive the same gospel later, if they respond, they benefit from the same mercy of God, not in a smaller portion, but in a similar portion. So when the others complained, well, for us, we came at early, at the 3rd hour, these ones came at the 11th hour, there's no way we get paid the same. No, you don't get to dictate on God's grace. God decides, the paymaster decides. So, in summary, if God, and I want to put an if, because some people don't believe, but for me who believes that God is in charge, his sovereign mercy, his sovereign grace is not limited to a fetus or a very old person. All benefit from the same mercy because he knows what you have done. You don't go and tell God, you know what, God, while you were not watching, I accidentally or I intentionally did ABCD. No, he actually knows. He knows a fetus, he knows a 10-year-old, he knows a 60-year-old who is sleeping with a campus girl, he knows a government official, he knows a young man, 25, a graduate who has just been enrolled in URA, who was desperately, or rather redirected or entered wrong information in a declaration form. He knows everything we do in secret and in public. He knows a fetus, which you might call innocent. And that's a different conversation. So does God have the moral authority? Yes, he had. Unless you know anyone else who has a higher moral standard. And I think that question came in. I'm not going to answer all questions, but I think I wanted to emphasize that. And we have a lot more time to talk later on. But I don't know whether I've responded to a specific question for all of them, but in summary, Peter says, and the 100-year-old people are all human and they are all accountable to God. But God knows. You cannot go to a judge. You cannot think that someone can judge unless they know. Okay, so we cannot question God's judgment. Okay, I cannot say we cannot. I want to ask, what grounds do we have to question God's judgment unless we want to claim to have a higher moral ground ourselves or we can name any other? I will leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Gospel Ninja. Before your network jumps off, Musazi, before I move to the next person, how are you feeling about Gospel Ninja's response?
Well, from his standpoint as a Christian, I think what he has told us is what he has to say. The problem I have with answering these questions, getting people to answer them, is that what they tell you is just an opinion. And that is really important. Because when we say that MTN launched in Uganda in November 1998, that is a fact. You can go back to records, you can ask people who have been using MTN, especially the ones with digits that begin with 0772. They're going to tell you, oh, we've been with this network since 1998. That is a fact. when a priesty, when a religious person, when a cardinal, when an imam, whatever, tells you, but that's not how God does things. They are simply expressing their opinion. And if it's an opinion grounded in fact, you can accept that. But here is somebody telling you, you know, go for God, anything with life, whether we are talking about a 90-year-old, a fetus, an embryo, whatever, there is no difference. The
Musazi,
question,
let me ask you. Sorry to cut you short. What kind
no
of
problem.
empirical evidence would you want in regards to God in this day and
Okay,
age? Because
that's a very,
Christians will argue,
that's a,
or should I say religious people, at least many here are Christians, they will say there's been a record of people interacting with this God, and they've written a record called the Bible. And that's the first thing you dismiss from
yes, because the
Christianity.
Bible
So
has
then
got,
what do you want? What do you want them to tell you or to give you? Just
yeah,
kindly
you know,
explain.
you know, you've just cited the Bible, and for many believers, they try to present it as the best evidence they have of the existence of God. But you know, when you look at the evidence in the Bible, there are lots of question marks upon them. If you look, for example, at the very first verse and chapter of the book, which says, "In the beginning, God." This verse, this chapter assumes that every single person that is on this planet actually already believes in God. It does not even begin to explain what God is. And we do know that there is any number of gods, thousands of gods. So,
Musazi, that's another question. I don't want us to go there.
okay,
But
yeah,
what I wanted you to answer is
I
what
was
kind of
coming,
empirical evidence
I
would
was
satisfy
coming,
your
yeah, I
mm.
think I was coming to that. Maybe I digressed a bit, but that's what I am coming to. The empirical evidence should be evidence that is can be repeated. It's universal. If you go to Japan, if you go to Spain, if you go to Gabon, Lesotho, Swaziland, everybody there is going to accept that it's real evidence of the existence of God. But that's not the kind of evidence we have.
Okay, thank you. Gospel Ninja, your hand is up. I'll give you 1 minute and then I'll go to Peter. Gospel Ninja.
Thank you very much. I think why I raised my hand is because I think the main question that's why I kept saying if Musazi is raising the core question to look at into Musazi's scenario that he raised about the atheist mother and the fetus is perhaps God's existence. And that's why I kept saying if you noted, I said if we bring in God in the picture. And I also asked the question of, does he have an alternative? Let me say a few things about God's existence, because he said empirical evidence that can be tested or repeated. And that is a good one. But then, even if you talk about Asia, Europe, that it can be tested everywhere, are you trying to say that the notion or the idea, if you wish, of God has not been tested globally, like you've not heard of evidence globally? And let's think about what kind of evidence are you looking for? Scientifically tested evidence from apparatus? That is not the God we are talking about. And then you risk highly positioning scientific phenomena or apparatus as quote unquote a God in itself, if I may say. Why? Because then you suggest that it is the highest authority. Where then do you put philosophy? Where then do you put the arts? Where then do you put history? Where then do you put spiritual reality of humans? How do you explain the mind and the soul, psychology? Because then, if you're talking about a hand, a palm, you get the finger of science evidence that can be tested by science, and then you say, this would be satisfactory concerning the existence of God. Then you throw away all the evidence throughout history. You literally say the church and all its history, the believers in God and their existence over the ages, they don't count because we cannot test what they believe scientifically. That's not fair. Also, there's a lot more in terms of people's experiences, experiential reality, relevance, in terms of realistically, people saying, this is my life, this is what I've lived. And again, I'm used to by quoting the Bible, but not only the Bible, over and over again, historians, we have quoted historians in the early days of the Christian faith, the Christian movement, who attest to this and corroborate the story that Christians tell. And these are historians who are not necessarily Christians. For example, Roman historians who had nothing to do with the Christian faith, for who actually
Gospel Ninja, I don't want us to digress too much into that. That I know that's another topic altogether.
I'm
but I know you're responding
if you neglect the question of the existence of God, everything else you say later on about God, because if someone, anyway, let me leave it if you're okay with it. But I realize that the question of God's existence is crucial. And I wish for someone who rejects God's existence to offer an alternative, not just to dismiss, but to offer an alternative. How do you explain our existence? Because when you explain our existence, when you explain life, anything afterwards has to come back to that framework. You can't say that, okay, God created, something created, he exists by this means, and then sustained by this means, and then end up the other way. So I feel, for me personally, we still have to get to a place of agreement, whether disagreement, but at least whether we explore certain dimensions to that question and come to an agreement, whether it matters or not. Otherwise, everything else we keep just talking. All right, thank you.
Oh, fair enough, Raymond. But like I said, I know the topic of God, by the way, is multi-layered. There are so many facets we could discuss. I mean, evidence is the thing that keeps coming up. I think many atheists would actually say, I don't have any evidence, or there are so many gods and all. So, and I know we can also spend another 3 hours just discussing that. So, but I just want to refocus the debate in a way that we don't lose track of the initial question, which is about pain, suffering, and the whole morality of God. But I know the underlying issues there, and you're right, Gospel Ninja. We'll come back to those probably another time. Peter, let me come to you now. I hope you've been following the discussion.
Hello, yes, please.
Yeah, we can hear you. Just respond to Musa's questions. It's a series of questions, but just find where to come in, like Gospel Ninja did.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Musazi Namiti, for sharing your thoughts and for sharing your experiences. And I think this is what I have to say. And the question that Mr. Musazi puts forward, to the largest extent, says, how do we know with utmost certainty the thing or the being God exists? Mr. Musa's question is about certainty of knowledge, or how do we know? How do we know what we know? Then number two, I'm trying to summarize according to what I've perceived, is why is there suffering if there is a God who is all-loving? And I would like to quickly first respond to that before I go to the first. We suffer, there could be many reasons, but number one, because of who God is. Okay, we suffer because of who God is. Number one, we suffer because of who we are. Number three, we suffer because of where we are. I want to begin there. We suffer because of who God is. Number two, we suffer and we encounter whatever we call suffering. We suffer because of who we are, and we suffer because of where we are. Now, fundamentally, those are fundamentals. Good. Those are fundamentals trying to attempt the question, why do we suffer? Or why do we have pain? Why is there suffering? And I'll begin with number one. We suffer because of who God is. Now, God is a sovereign God. And in this context, sovereignty means what he or she disagrees with, he has permitted for that to exercise all its full power, yet it has nothing. It doesn't dethrone him. It doesn't overthrow him or her. That is the first thing, that a sovereign God has no problem with everything he or she agrees with and that which he or she does not agree with, to exercise its full power without God being worried of dethronement. So if you are God and you're sovereign, that means whatever you agree and you disagree with must exercise itself to the fullest. So God is not like Mr. Museveni or any other powerful person who can who allows rebels to exercise their opposition with all full force without his or her throne being threatened. Number one. Number two, still about God, who God is. When you say you're God of justice, then X and Y must exercise themselves to the fullest, because justice means what is sauce to the goose, it is sauce to the gander. That's number one. Number two, who are we? We are choosing beings. We are choosing beings, and these are fundamentals here. And at a certain point, we chose. You know, when you're a God who creates choosing beings, your hands are tied. In fact, you don't have a right to give anything as the ones you gave chance to choose pray. If you created a being and you created a choosing being, you are not fully at liberty to permit everything this choosing being asks. You're not at liberty. Why? Because you created a choosing being. So you need to ensure that when they're exercising their choice or they're choosing freedom, the greatest task you have is to provide information. That is your greatest task. So if you created a choosing being, you must let the choosing being exercise their choice, but within the realm of information. And then lastly, where we are. Where we are, suffering is. If we were not in a place where suffering is, the geography where suffering is, then suffering would not access us, or we wouldn't access suffering. So if you want to undo suffering, number one, create a new environment. Make a new environment where suffering is not.
That's what Christians call heaven.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it is Christians who call it heaven.
Okay, finish your submission, Peter.
Yeah. So that's the point I can make about suffering in this aspect. I will return later if there are any follow-up questions on my submissions. I'm happy to attempt. How do we know God exists? I'll come back later. I don't want to take a lion's share. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So Peter has summarized this submission in 3. He says the reason there's suffering and pain is, first of all, because of who God is. He's a sovereign God who's not threatened by evil exercising its power, because everything is under him. And then he said, because of who we are choosing beings. And then thirdly, he said we are suffering because of where we are, which is earth. And then I asked whether that's why there's a promise of a new heaven and a new earth, because then we are going to be recreated afresh in a new environment without sin. And of course, there's a whole other topic we can have about heaven. Yeah. So that's Peter's submission. If you're just joining us, we're discussing the morality of God in light of pain and suffering in the world. I mean, babies die, mothers die while giving birth to life. Today is back to school in Uganda. Kids are home, seated, no school fees. Congo right now, there's a war raging. And Gaza, Palestine, and so on and so forth. So yeah, why pain and suffering in light of a loving God? Is God even moral? What does the morality of God look like? What does the justice of God look like? Does it see justice the same way we see it here? Our justice here is tit for tat. Is that how God sees it? Those are some of the questions we're exploring this evening, and we do this every Monday between 6 and 8 p.m. If you're free and if you have time, please join us. The link is the same. The passcode is the same. Yeah, feel free. Here you can participate by raising your hand, of course, your electronic hand. If you have something to say, you can also type it in the chat. I'll be able to follow if you have something to say. Yeah, so that's how you participate. I see 2 hands up. Let me first give Musazi a chance, and then I'll come back to you, Gospel Ninja. Musazi.
I just want to respond very quickly to to Peter's first statement that we suffer because of what God is. If you look at people in Switzerland, for example, or Qatar, these are high-income countries, and the level of poverty, as you know, in high-income countries is very low. So you don't have the suffering the people of Uganda, Burundi, DRC have. I mean, the suffering is not the same as in Switzerland and Qatar. And now I would like to know, why is it that God wouldn't do anything about people in the DRC, Burundi, Uganda, the ones, for example, who don't have enough to eat, they cannot pay medical bills. In high-income countries, you don't have those problems. You may have a few people who are poor, but you don't have those problems. Why is there a difference? Because this God we are talking about is responsible for the people in Qatar, Switzerland, and in Burundi, DRC, and Uganda.
Okay, let Peter answer that, Musazi. Peter, please answer that before I go to Gospel Ninja.
Number one, I like the underlying claim from Mr. Musazi that now he agrees that it is just a matter of degree. But in Switzerland and in the United States and in Qatar, suffering is. And in Goma, suffering is. The only difference is where the underlying principle, the denominator is they all suffer. Number one. Number two, why the difference? The difference is partly in my second response, partly who we are and partly where we are. So the difference in the magnitude of suffering or the quality of suffering in Chihuatule versus the quality of suffering in Qatar could be explained by the quality of those who are there and the environment. And when I talk of the environment here, I don't just mean only the geographical one. It's not only the geographical one, but also the ideological environment, the cultural environment, the political, in fact, the 7 mountains of culture. So the 7 mountains of culture, which are a product of who we are, that can account for the difference. The denominator is suffering is everywhere. Everywhere. The only difference is in magnitude and quality.
Thank you, Peter.
I submit.
I think that's sufficient to respond to Musazi. Gospel Ninja, I want to give you just 2 minutes and then I'll bring in other people. Gospel Ninja.
Thank you, moderator. I think the question that our brother, has he left? Namiti? No, not Namiti. Is it Namiti?
Musazi Namiti is online. He's listening to you.
Yeah, Namiti. Because I'd taken his name down. Yes. The question is raising in terms of other people not suffering. Obviously, thank you, Peter, for responding to that. It's actually unimaginable. Suffering is universal. And it's risky. It's very risky to even imagine that just because the other ones don't suffer in the same way you suffer, then they are not suffering, or they are suffering less. You see, one of the people, of course, it is an age-old problem, an age-old discussion. And I remember one scholar defining it as the state of having what you don't want and wanting what you don't have. If you will hear it, a state of having what you don't, having what you don't want, and wanting what you don't have. Just think about it, having pain while wanting relief, but you don't have it. Or having poverty while needing relief from poverty, whether wealth or having anything. Just think about it. Being in a situation that you don't want and not being in the situation that you want is a state of suffering. And others would call it a state of bearing under something. It can be a problem, it can be stress, it can be anything, or even a war. But people in the West, or people in Arabia, in Dubai, in Qatar, they have things they don't want to be with, and they have a state of suffering. In fact, I remember listening to one young millionaire and famous person who said, it is ridiculous for people to imagine that for them they don't suffer. It is unfair to even imagine that for them they don't suffer. Actually, I want to say that I've had the privilege to wrestle with this question and write my dissertation on it. As Jethro said, suffering in our world can be even self-inflicted by the decisions that we make. We know it very well. All of you know that there is a decision that you have made at one point and has cost you and has come with consequences. There is suffering that is inflicted by others. All of you have the potential of causing pain and suffering to another, just as I do. But there is suffering which we choose, we take on sacrificially. Mothers, revolutionaries, and of course, the cross. Sacrificial, you bear it on behalf of others. People see you and they ask, what is wrong with this? Why doesn't he just leave it? Why doesn't Mandela just accept and get out of jail in the second year? Why does he have to go through 27? He's bearing it on behalf of the others. If you live in Uganda, you know very well, if you complain about the suffering of today, somebody's going to tell you, wait a minute, you don't know the suffering we went through before, and that people made decisions in the 70s and 80s, and they suffered much more suffering than you're suffering now. So please bear with the suffering that you endure, that you're facing now. And then there is innocent suffering, and I think this is crucial to the question that you asked, that which we can't explain. That which we cannot explain, whether theologically or scientifically or psychologically, or even the way you've been thinking philosophically. That, how do we explain that one? And I think Peter brought in the fact that God is sovereign. He knows there's no way. But if you attribute it to nature, then you get into trouble, right? However, at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, as Peter said, is there another world? Forget about heaven. Don't talk about heaven. Is there another world that you're imagining where suffering is not on Mars? And if this is our world where we exist, what better explanation do we have? Hence, also the atheist or agnostic or any other belief worldview has to come up with an explanation. Okay, how else? Is it chaos? Is it nature dancing to the tune of its creator? Like, just running into each other. So the suffering that we're enduring or experiencing is just, we are atoms, we are pieces in nature, bumping into each other. Cancer hits you, it's just nature hitting you. Endure it. How else can we think through this? Leave God outside of it and leave heaven out of it. Can we also ask ourselves questions without God? I wish we could also think about it that way. I may not have responded to your question the way you want it, but I wanted to add more to what Peter had said. And
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, Raymond. AKA Gospel Ninja, AKA by name Punu. The man has many names. Oh, but that one is not for Monday, that name. Anyway.
That one is for business.
Okay. Isaiah, I want to bring you in at this point. I hope you followed the discussion to an extent. But even then, even if you have not, I want to pose a series of questions around the morality of God. First of all, is there a universal moral code given by God? What makes God even moral to give such a moral code? In this day we live in this day and age, people have their truth, your truth, my truth, okay? You do what you want, I do what I want. You do you, I do me. So why is there the necessity of a moral code, especially one from God? Why is there something like an absolute standard? Isaiah, I hope you can hear me. All these questions I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm following.
So I just want us to talk about this standard of morality, which we Christians believe is given by God, or is from God, or even is God himself. So just kind of talk about why. First of all, is there a standard moral code, an absolute moral code? Yes or no? If yes, is it from God or is just from nature? Because many people say, I don't need God to be moral. I'm born knowing right and wrong. Or the society where I live, kind of teaches me right and wrong. So just talk about that.
Well, good evening, everyone. I was following the conversation. I'm sorry I came in late. I'm still apologizing, though I earlier even communicated in the chat. That apology of mine, but I'm finally here. First, I would like to thank everyone who came on time and wrestled with all these questions. I thank God for this platform because every time we meet here, we grow and outgrow. So for me, it is a blessing to always be here because every time I'm here, I learn and unlearn a number of things. So I think I will run away from the term absolute because philosophically that is a very risky and slippery ground to tread.
Term do you want to use?
Yeah, I want to use objective, if you don't mind.
Yes, that's okay.
And when I use objective, for those of you who understand using absolute, then you can always use absolute as a synonym, though I wouldn't advise. But for purposes of understanding, let's say objective. So, and then I would rephrase the question and say, is there anything like objective morality? And what we mean by that is what is termed as good in one corner of the world where there's a sociology of human beings, it is that very thing that is also addressed as good in the other corner of the world. And what is addressed as immoral in one corner of the world is also addressed as immoral in the other corner of the world. For me, that would be an objective moral standard. And I can give examples. without asking the question of what is stealing and whether stealing is relative, I can boldly say that stealing is bad in almost all the corners of the world, or at least in all sociologies of human beings. Stealing is wrong, is immoral. It is just immoral. And it will be discussed in all courts of law. And 99% of all courts of law in the entire world will not be discussing whether it is right or wrong to steal. However, they will be understanding whether what is termed as stealing happened. And that's where you'll have the prosecutor and the other defendant lawyers before the judge, in every court at least. But at least objectively, all these courts of law, they don't have to be Christians, they don't have to be pagans, they don't have to be religious people, they don't have to be any of that. Stealing is objectively an immoral act. So, moderator, to respond to your question, whether there is something like objective morality, I would use such examples, and you could go on and on. They might not be so many, but at least there are those. So for me, there is, yes.
If there's objective morality, is it given by God, or human beings world over just agree that stealing is bad, taking what's not yours is bad? Is God involved there?
Yeah, sure. You see, when you say that is God involved there, that also is is a very interesting question, because when you are a religious person or one who belongs to a particular cult that has a deity, all right, they will have to divinate. I hope that is not my term that I have created. But what I mean by divinating is baptizing what is wrong with the deity and baptizing what is baptizing what is right with the deity and baptizing what is wrong with an opponent spiritistic kind of thing or darkness or whatever I want to call it. So that whole thing of mystifying, all right, mystifying morality and immorality is a crime that has been committed by majority believers in gods. Can I say that again?
Yes, and of course you're going to explain what you mean.
Yes, the crime communicated by the majority believers in gods is mystifying objective morality or even morality altogether, baptizing all these with gods, that kind of mystification, whereby when you ask religious people or those who believe in gods, why don't you steal? The first answer will not be that it is because it is the wrong thing to do. No. The first answer will be, it is because my God, and by God here I mean God small letter, I don't want to use God. There are reasons for that. But the first answer will be, my God told me not to do so. Now, for me, this is patronistic. This is it's not satisfying. But you know, you have to begin from somewhere. As far as human sociology is concerned, you have to begin from somewhere. In our churches, we have what we call Sunday school. We can teach the same concept to the children and also teach the same concept to the adults, their parents, but we teach those concepts differently. But they can have the same sermon in one Sunday, but we teach them differently. Why? Because of the audience there that you're attending to. But moderator, what I need people here to understand is this, that the crime that religious and cult members and those who believe in gods, the crime that they have committed is mystifying the entire scope of morality and turning it into a deity code. And they are not doing the right thing because it is the right thing. They are doing the right thing because there is a reward that the deity promised. So this carrot and stick kind of mindset is what has been challenged by the world-thinking members of society. And I don't want us to fall into that pit. For me, and I'm not saying that we should take God now, capital G, out of morality altogether. But we shouldn't front the moral argument of God. Should not be presented as God being the ultimate reason as to why we are doing what is right. Then we wouldn't be having our own heads. Okay, what if God did not say that stealing is wrong? Would we be stealing therefore? Well, for some of us who are not so wise, we would still not steal. Because why this moral argument fails, moderator, is when you look at the 10 commandments and you mystify them, okay? And then you assume that those who do not believe in the Bible are thieves. They violate the 7th commandment. Yet there's statistics that communities that are not even believers in God are a little bit more faithful than communities that worship day and night. So I think, moderator, we should tread softly and carefully here before we turn these morals into directives from God, and we are doing that because it is a directive from God. We are not doing whatever we are doing right because we know it is the right thing to do. So for me, moderator, I think that is very important to understand. I hope I explained that part of the question.
Yeah, you did. I know there are many reactions that are going to come up. If you want to say something, please raise your hand or, type in the chat. I'll be happy to give you a chance or to read out whatever. Isaiah, I just hope you're not trying to sound politically correct by this putting God in a third chamber and removing him from this first chamber. There's objective morality, but God is behind there. I don't bring him here in the front. Isn't that trying to appeal to,
No,
Isaiah, let me first attempt that one before I bring Gospel Ninja.
Yes, I am not pushing God out of that, but I am, because we are discussing objective morality, I am trying to be objective even in my argument about the objective morality. And the objectivity that I'm trying to demonstrate here is that Bible readers do understand that Paul in Romans chapter 2, I think verse 13 or 14, he said that he was actually speaking to a Jewish community that was so obsessed with keeping the law, etc., and they were boasting in knowing the law of God. We know the law of God, and then Paul cast a challenge to them and said that there are many people around the world, because Paul had actually moved around the world and met Gentiles, and then he told them there are many people around the world who are actually observing the law without the law. There's a text in the Bible that the many people around the world are observing the law without the law. So without even knowing them, but they're observing all these tenets of the law that we observe here. Those guys are actually good. Some of them actually even better than us at that. And his challenge was like, so if you boast that we are the ones who have the law, we are the custodians of the law, how about those actually who are practicing what you are just custodians for? That was a very fundamental challenge to that. And for that point, Paul, and I would like to hop on his wagon and says that we are trying to communicate, first of all, to fellow believers that we must, because when God comes into our lives, he comes to reorganize our psychologies, our mental faculties, and then put them back to normal. That is what God comes to do. And then when he comes to that is essentially what it means to be born again, for us who preach about being born again. Your life being reorganized, reordered to the original, to the original. The whole story of the Bible, we begin with the Garden of Eden, where everything is perfect, and then we end with the island of Patmos, where everything is horrible, and we anticipate a new Eden. That's what we anticipate. I create a new heavens and earth. So the whole thing of Christianity is about reordering what has been turned into disorder and chaotic as we know life today. So we just have to do that. But moderator, another very important thing before I give way to people here to come and participate is even where there is the knowledge of what is right, okay, and what is wrong, we Christians argue there is an inspiration. Does that make sense?
Keep going, keep going.
There's something, and I don't want to call it God here because I'm trying to be objective. There is something, there's an intelligent and intelligible something or someone who is inspiring our instincts of discerning what is wrong from what is right. Because the idea that what is wrong and what is right is relative has been dismissed even in pagan and unbelieving communities. There is no atheist that will tell you that what is right and what is wrong is relative. And if anyone dares to say so, we will challenge his experience and practicality of living. Do you think that the traffic lights are relative? Why do you stop on the traffic lights? Because you want to avoid chaos that might result into accident. Why? Because accident and chaos and crashing is wrong. You can't say crashing is relative. So there's something, there is someone that is intelligible, that is inspiring our instincts to make that discernment of what is right and what is wrong. And the process continues until we come up with what we call objective morality. Christians like myself have argued that anything that inspires objective morality as we know it today cannot be a non-living thing, cannot be something caused by a big bang. It can't be these fluids and chemicals. It must be an intelligible being that is involved into the historicity of human beings and existing on this world. That's our argument, Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, some people have been putting up their hands for a long time. Let me start with Gospel Ninja, then Musaza, I'll come to you. Yeah, so Gospel Ninja.
Isaiah concluded very well, because the question we are dealing with is whether God has a place when we come to discuss morality. Obviously, I don't know whether dogs have a similar conversation about morality or whether lions will have the same conversation. They're also creation. But we as human beings, it is evidence, our inclination, our desire for that which is good in view of that which is bad as well, is evidence that we are not a product, or we are not made, or we don't come to exist because of a non-moral creating force, namely nature, a purposeless, mindless force. No, it points to our existence. It does appear, and I would say, as though that whatever force brought us into existence, whatever brought us into this world where we are, seems to have an awareness of what morality is, but not merely as we see it, but even in a greater way, in a transcendent way. So our desire for good cannot be the standard of good. We desire good, but we actually can't set the standard. It just points to the fact that in our nature, there is that desire. But don't forget, while we desire good, we are inclined to evil and wrong. But the question then comes, how do we even know that one thing is bad or good? You may think that because we agree stealing is bad, then therefore it is bad. But has knowing stopped us from doing it? Has knowing that killing people is evil or bad stopped us from doing it? No. Hence, knowing alone does not arbitrate Am I using the right language? Or adjudicate over morality. We know all these things that are bad and wrong, yet we end up doing them, which is clear that that is not enough. Hence, there has to be. So the question whether God has the moral authority, the alternative question, and I still come back to this, would be, what is the alternative narrative for our existence? If it is a random forces of nature, chaotic, then how do we even tell good from evil or from bad in the reality, in the alternative, where it is chaotic, as Peter, as Isaiah concluded there? Therefore, when we position these two alternatives of existence, where God is potentially in charge and has moral authority, and where there is no one except us, then believe me, you know it very well. Even where there is the law that governs us, there are people for whom, because they have power, and again, selfishly, would rather that the law doesn't work and doesn't exist. And even if it does, they will try to usurp it. And we do that because we are humans. Hence, our nature. Hence, the narrative that tells us about the true nature of who we are. We are sinful. We are inclined to evil. We would rather do the wrong thing until someone apprehends us. Who is that? Ourselves, a similar person, a human being who is inclined to do their own wrong, who will only do good selfishly. Even when it comes to love, they will do it selfishly. So, whichever we choose, it still has to give us a framework on how to wrestle with our life, our existence, our sustenance, our continuity, and ultimately our destiny. And amid this chaos of suffering and pain. All right? Even when we know, we can explain why we suffer, we cannot take our suffering. We can't. Hence, we have to think about, is there a life where it is not? And then people will say, no, there isn't. You only have to die in order to get out of this world where there is suffering. Or an alternative world view will tell you, hey, actually, you've not yet suffered. You live a good life to avoid worse, more suffering in the next life. Because in the reincarnation, if you come out, if you live badly here, in this one, you're going to suffer much worse. But you don't have to. There is an alternative story that tells you that you don't have to, because the one who began life from the beginning offers life now, today, differently, and tomorrow, even when you die, to continue in a different, better, without life, without suffering, without pain. And I think Isaiah alluded to Revelation. Anyway, I just said God has the moral authority. Why? Because he's the only, I would say, reasonable explanation of why we exist and even have the sense of wrong and right or good and evil.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you. Ustaz, I've kept you for a long time. I hope you still have your train of thought.
Yes, and all I want to say is that whereas everybody here is entitled to their views, I think the argument that morality can be linked to God, or God should be the source of our morality, is very problematic, because anybody who has read the Bible, the problem I have with Christians who have read the Bible is that they cherry pick what they read. They if it's nice, then they have read the Bible. If it's grotesque, if it does not say a lot about morality vis-a-vis God, then they don't want to talk about it. But whoever has read the Bible and read books such as Leviticus, Kings, Deuteronomy, I think would struggle to say that God has anything to do with morality. And
Why do you think that, Ustaz? What's wrong with Deuteronomy and Leviticus? Just give us an example too.
well, all the terrible things human beings are doing, for which they are sent to prison, have been done there. In fact, there's a very good description of God in the Old Testament, which I find fascinating. One author wrote that the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it?
Richard Dawkins.
Exactly. Unjust and unforgiving, control freak, many things.
Yeah,
So
I read that description of God by
we can
Richard Dawkins.
we can go on and on and on. And I said, you are entitled to your views when you say, well, the God who created us is a moral, supreme being, but in actions.
Okay, Musaz, before I let you go, where does this, what Isaiah called objective morality, come from, in your view? What is that
In
thing
my
behind
view,
that?
in my view is that
So
we
that thing or that
humans
someone?
actually in human relations we are driven by interests. If you do something good, you know it's going to bring you good. So if you don't steal, you assume that other people are not going to steal, so you live in a theft-free society, which of course is impossible. If you help me, I help you. If you greet me, and we've seen this. If you come walk into a meeting and you know the people who are in the meeting room and you don't say anything to them, then they're going to say, what's wrong with him? If you say hello everybody, if you start greeting people, you see people smiling, you see people welcoming you warmly, which wouldn't happen if you just walked in and sat down and minded your business. So I would say some may find this as a simplistic explanation, but I would say that part of the reason we are moral as human beings is that we benefit from being moral. If you don't steal, you are not you are you are making a society that is one thief less minus, if I may put it that way.
Okay, so Musaz is arguing that even our our selfishness is what drives us to even be good. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Peter, your hand is up. You want to respond to Musazi?
Yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to bring a point of information that it should be understood by Mr. Musazi that not every time you read the word God in the Old Testament, what you read God is God. That is very critical to understand.
Peter, you're scaring some of you. Please explain what you mean.
That is very, very critical. The God, as every time you read God did this and God did this, as you read the Old Testament, it is important to note that not as you know him today or as this God is known today is what was meant. Let me quickly give an example here. We did discover, or we did see last year, that the God who asked for Isaac as a sacrifice is scarcely the God who provided the lamb. But as you read, because you're reading Lord, oh God, God, you think you're reading the same thing. Now, that is another day, but we have a study there. We have recordings. We have these lessons or these teachings on record. So it is very important as you raise Deuteronomy and Leviticus and so on, to always remember that not every time you read, and the Lord gave an order to Saul or to Saul to go and slaughter the Amalekites, you're reading the God as we know him, the God who bled on the cross. Now, I just wanted to bring that information. Number two, it is also important to remember that the narratives or the talk and text that you read in the Old and the New Testament have a social-cultural and historical background. So every time you read them out of their history, every time you read them out of their culture, every time you read them out of their society, you fall prey to breathing your meaning or to inculcating a message in a text which message is not created or rather communicated by the text. So it is always important that we need the help of them who have studied these things to guide us. Why? Because the narratives of the Bible have a history, they have a society, they have a culture before they're applied to our time. We must first remain faithful to their history, faithful to their culture, and faithful to their society. Otherwise, we become victims of anachronism, where we breathe our contemporary meaning into a time or a history which never intended to communicate what we think we interpret. Thank you.
Thank you, Petero. Thank you, Petero. Petson has his hand up. I know he likes this topic, but Petson, please don't digress. We're talking about morality.
Me,
So whatever you
I've
say
been,
is going to be in the context.
yes, I've been following, and I remember when Musazi brought the point of the Bible. When you question the Bible, that the Bible has gaps. You moderator, you came out to say that this was a piece that was written by some people, probably who experienced, and they documented it, and we can in quote say that this is an authentic document. Now, when Peter is presenting, he's saying that what you see written there, some of those things are not true. So I want you to come back and reconcile this, because Musazi, Jet, you said this is the true document. That Peter is saying that no, it has errors. Where you see God is written on, where you see God is performing bad thing, that is not God. He was misrepresented. He's only represented well when we see God is doing good things. So now first say, draw for us a line, which one is right, which one is wrong.
Thank you, Petson. First of all, you're misquoting me. I didn't say, because Musazi was asking for evidence from Russia, from China, from Africa. I said there's documented, there are documented experiences of people who experienced this God we are talking about, written in the Bible. Because he wanted empirical evidence.
True.
So I told him people have written their experiences.
True.
And then they're dismissing them.
And Peter is saying those experiences are wrong. Some.
No. Peter,
That's what
please
Peter
come
said.
and defend yourself. At
That's
least you're
what
still
Peter said.
online.
Because when we see God killing people in the Old Testament, Peter is saying that is wrong, that is not God.
Okay, Peter, I'm going to give you a chance to respond. And then Mukwan, I see your hand is up. Peter, please, very briefly. I don't want us to digress into the authenticity of the Bible. I think that's a whole other topic we can have here. Canonization and things like that. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, may Dr. Mukwana please go first? I'll come later.
Okay, sure. Dr. Mukwana, please. Fresh from Makerere PhD. Dr. Mukwana.
Thank you, Chair. I want to draw from, maybe Peter, you can reduce the volume a bit. Yeah, I want to draw from what Peter normally says. Yeah, Peter normally says that when you get God wrong, you get everything about your life wrong. And for me, I want to add and say, I think it is even better to get God wrong and get everything about your life wrong. But it's dangerous not to get God at all, because everything is not only wrong, but you are wrong yourself. I one time preached somewhere when I was still young in the secondary school, and a certain man came and asked me that who first made, who turned water into wine. So I told that man that I don't know. He said, it's in your Bible. I gave him the Bible to open and show me, and he even didn't know. What's amazing is that people who don't know the Bible want to refer the Bible. Now, when somebody tells you that there are so many bad acts in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, when you know that those books are totally about morality, they may have a clue of what they're talking about, but they're quoting a Bible they don't know. So that simply tells you that there is already a bias, because Deuteronomy is about the laws, it's about morality. Ideally, it's about morality. And Leviticus, there is no killing in those two books. So once you don't know God, in fact, once somebody quotes the Bible wrong, it means they have never even interacted with it. That's why it is very important for people to understand that actually God, to me, I know Isaiah has run away from it, but it's the supreme moral being. Now, when whatever has been written about the Bible, whether we go to the 10 Commandments, it's all about morality. When you look at the 10 Commandments, don't do this to your neighbor, don't do this to your mother, don't do this to you. It's about morality. And those, when you look at the 10 Commandments, are those 10 Commandments universally, morally recognized? Now, whether people don't recognize them because of their weaknesses or here and there, they remain universal, because nobody wants to his wife to be cheated on. Nobody wants his parent to be disrespected. Nobody wants to be stolen from, you know, when you look at all those. So the biggest problem we have here is, and I'm very happy that I'm a doctor, I'm a PhD holder, and I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. Because people have been masquerading that when you read so much, then you discover there is no God. Now, for me, I'm going to become a professor who believes in the Lord Jesus Christ, who believes in God who created the universe, who believes in God who wants his people to be morally upright, even when he knows that they cannot be. And that's the reason he dies for them, to support them to be immoral, to be morally upright. Now, when we come to, yes.
Okay, just finish your submission, sorry.
Oh, okay, Chair. Let me end there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukwana. Fresh off the PhD trail in Makerere University, Kampala. Gospel Ninja, I want to give you just 2 minutes. I know you want to talk about the Bible. It's a pity Musazi has dropped off briefly, and it is the one who started all this ruckus of morality of God, Old Testament, New Testament, and all. But I know he will probably listen to the recording, or for someone else who's following the discussion. Gospel Ninja.
Thank you. It's a very, this discussion is not only for Musaj. Unfortunately, it's off, but it's for all of us.
True.
You see, I have had the privilege of living in a place called Karamoja for 7 years. I was there as a missionary. And for the 7 years, I want to be honest with you, I saw these things that you read or see on TV and in the media, but it was never mine. I was a foreigner from Kampala, born and raised in Banda near Chambogo in the city. I was in Karamoja and I was in Kampala once a month or once every 2 months. And I was a Kampala boy. Their suffering wasn't mine. I had money to live on. I was using the internet. But as a missionary, I was very concerned about their circumstances. I would say you can rightly call them a suffering community in many ways, but that's because you're viewing them from your Kampala background or through your Kampala lenses. But me as a church planter and a missionary, I witnessed something in Karamoja that led me after 7 years and then being away for several years. And when I was doing my master's dissertation, I wanted to study these people. How come when I was with them, their faith never wavered? How come these people were so fervent in their belief in God and were planting more churches? How come these people still believed in God? I wanted to know why. But when I lived with them, their suffering wasn't mine. And so I wasn't so concerned. Believe me, and I would dare say, it took me, one, losing my wife to cancer, two, having an almost fatal accident that left me with a brachial plexus injury in my left hand that I haven't been able to use for 5 years now. As I was going through all that, I wrestled with it. Why? Because I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor. I have been a missionary. I have served God. I remember one young man in the youth ministry that I was leading taking me out for breakfast at Cafe Javas and saying, Raymond, I am battered. I'm embattled. I don't understand how God has not protected you or has not taken care of you. He said, when your wife died, I was concerned. And I said, okay, people die. Okay, spouses die. But she was young, 32 and a half, almost 33. She left you with the young kids and you are suffering with them. Now you get an accident. I am concerned. Of course, people said a lot of things from an African point of view. Maybe in your quota, Simanya spirit of premature death. I need deliverance, all that kind of stuff. But as I wrestled with it, and my faith was not wavering, I remember this guy called Philip asking me, because I've not seen you complaining or losing your faith. What's up? How are you hanging in? Please help me, because me, I am wrestling relationally as a friend. I don't understand. Why is it God taking care of his own? Now, when you look at the Old Testament and then you see God being a monster, or a bully, as Richard Dawkins refers to him, misogynist, blah, 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 that is cherry picking. That is exactly what we call cherry picking. And then I wanted Musaz to be here. And then you can accuse Christians of cherry picking. You've not paid attention to the fact that children of Israel suffered many times. Actually, there is huge records of them being under God's judgment, thrown into exile, thrown into captivity, famines. The reason they end up in Egypt is because they are living in a famine and they have no way of getting around it unless they go to Egypt. Why am I bringing all this? Well, let me bring you one more story. One of the most famous stories in the Bible is the story of Job. Job is a godly man. It is said at the beginning, he is a godly man. Among all the people on his side, he was a godly man, prosperous businessman, family man. What did he do to suffer the things he suffered? Nothing. Did God let it happen? Yes. At least for us who have the vantage point of reading the entire story. Let me tell you also, when Job wrestles with his suffering, from the beginning, from Job chapter 3 onwards, he wrestles, he complains, he calls God to give him answers. When God speaks to him finally, he doesn't tell him why, but it is interesting that Job will tell you in Job 42 verse 5. Of course, God also asks him questions about, do you know where the foundations of the earth are? Do you know the pillars that hold up the skies? Do you know the bowels of the extents of the rivers and the waters? Do you know the mountains? Blah, blah, blah. Job realizes, oh, wait a minute. Existence is not just about me as an individual. God is doing so much more. But even then, as the psalmist would say, who is a man? Who is the son of man that you care and you're mindful of? And God, Job says, you know what, God, Bansonyu, I have only heard of you and I've lived in you. But when I hear what you're saying, I move from a place of just hearing about you. And now I see who you are. You're greater than my Komodo, Kendo Wars, or what you are. I have been thinking that you're there just to firefight all that I face. Yet you are actually taking care of the universe. And even if I face something, you are there. You are there. The psalmist goes on to say, Psalm 23, and I dare to quote the Bible because it is, in a sense, also a record of history. Psalm 23, even though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me. me. Nzenga are facing a lot of people going through suffering and gone through my own and wrestled with it vis-a-vis my faith and journey with God. I've been comforted and strengthened by the fact that the good thing, he is not absent. Believe me, nature is present and you exist, oxygen is there. But when you're suffering, when I lost my wife, people were there for 2 weeks. Then all of a sudden, all of them disappeared. And I'm calling and saying people are part of nature. They disappeared. And I had to deal with my grief alone. And oxygen was there, I was breathing it. The pandemic came, I got COVID in the midst of grief. Nature was there, but it was not my comforter. And so we have to get to a point where we know that besides everything we can explain scientifically, there is more, not even there is more, and we know we have experienced it. So whether you're looking at it from a personal point of view or relational point of view, there are realities for you to look back to besides what you're going through or what you're wrestling with. Do not ignore them. They are pieces of evidence. Cherry picking from the Bible is inaccurate. Why? Because God does not punish one and leave another. The people he has judged and punished, we cannot doubt he judged them rightly. Because when it came time to punish Israel, he punished them to the point that when David sinned and God asked him, should I hand you over to the Philistines to punish you or should I punish you myself? David says, Omani, because the other guys, I do not trust their morality. At least you, I know. For you, I know when you punish me, you will comfort me.
Raymond, conclude.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you. There's an issue Musazi raised earlier. I think Isaiah, let me just bring in at this point. He said it is our collective selfishness which forces us to be moral. I don't know if I remember that statement he made. That even our pretending to be good is because we benefit from that so-called morality. For example, if I don't steal, it's also in my interest. I have the car. Sorry?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm saying, imagine we want to hold on to a morality that we uphold by pretending and selfishness. Honestly, when I hear people say things like that, I'm like, really? Really? When we know very well we are pretending, and that's the standard we want to use to uphold morality. Anyway, Canveyo,
yeah. Thank you, Gospel Ninja. Isaiah, what would you respond to that? I think Gospel Ninja has responded, but what would you add maybe?
You see, moderator, thank you very much. And very quickly, I hope I will. The problem with most of us human beings is that we are lazy, even in talking, even with words. we are lazy. And last Monday, I was accusing my brother Emma for being lazy because I know Emma. And I would also like now again to accuse Brother Musaz for also being lazy again. Because, moderator, when we say that we are selfish, do we understand what we are saying? Because selfishness, Mr. Moderator, is misapplied love.
Misapplied love.
Yes. It is love misapplied in the wrong way. It is loving one while hurting the other. That is selfishness. And I can tell you, moderator, this is shared even among animals. However, human beings take it an extra mile. And this is what Christianity has brought to the table, because Christianity has brought a counterculture to selfishness, and it has actually called it self-love. That's why the reference point of loving another person is loving yourself. The Lord Jesus told us, love your neighbor as, in reference, as. Now, that was a counterculture to our selfishness. Now, I could go on and on in that line, but for now, let me go back to that idea that morality is born out of our selfishness. It is impossible an objective moral code to be born out of selfishness. That is an impossibility, and this is why I'm accusing all of us of being lazy with the terms. You cannot argue that objective morality is born out of selfishness. I do not steal because I don't want people to steal from me. That is why I do not steal. No, when I don't want other people to steal from me, I build high fences, electrify those fences, hire dogs, hire security guards, surround the property that I've stolen with security. That is when I want to steal and don't want others to steal from me. And this has actually served successfully. There are areas that are highly protected. You go in Utah to the Mormon grounds. Actually, use your Google and Google the most secured places on planet Earth. You'll find those most secured places. So you cannot say that objective morality is born out of our selfishness. No, objective morality, using the model of thou shalt not steal, is born from our instincts of doing the right thing for the sake of it being right. And that rightness, our perception and conceptual understanding of what is right is inspired, our instincts of that is inspired by an intelligible being. We Christians have placed that being to be God. We want those who say that it is not God to give us an alternative. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. We have about 9 minutes to go. Who hasn't spoken and wants to speak now? Some people have been in Kamoli the whole time. My sister Nancha, represent the ladies. Oh, okay, Peter is back. Let me first go to Peter.
No, Mr. Morita, you had offered a chance for me to respond to Brother Pedson Asimwe.
Yes, exactly. About this God. When God does nice things, is the God. When he does wrong thing, quote unquote, the not so nice things, then he's not the one.
Now, two things. When I was responding to Mr. Msazi, I said it is good to be careful to remember that not every time you read the word God, as we read it in our translations, you have read God as understood today, or you have read God as understood on the cross, in the grave, and resurrected. That is one. Two, it is always also important to be careful to remember that the narratives or the conversations you're reading have a history, they have a culture, they have a society, they have a stage of revelation. They have a stage of God's revelation. For example, to be straight here, for example, for all the time that we have studied about the God who dies on the cross, that's the God I'm focusing on here. We have come to realize that the atrocities that I sometimes seen especially in the Old Testament discourse, are done within a context of warring gods. In other words, this God could only appeal to his or her audience by responding to the culture of the gods of the time. For example, the plagues, as recorded in Exodus, are plagues directed to the gods of those phenomena, the gods who are believed, or the gods in the archives of library of Egypt. In other words, this, Anang. Binempunu, kali. Yeah. So I was saying that, for example, giving an example to my brother Pedson, that, for example, when God turns the staff, Moses' staff, into a snake, and the snake swallows the other snakes, that miracle, I don't want to call it a miracle, that mystery or that mystic is a response to a certain god of snakes. When you see water turning into blood, is responding to a certain god in charge of water. When you see the darkness falling at midday, this god is responding to a fellow god. So the objects of the plagues are not the humans, but the gods. And this God is doing that because he could only be understood within the realm of the culture, the theological culture of the time. So that's why I said, and I'll say again, that that's why we need these people, the Pastor White, the Gospel Ninjas, the Biamukamas, who have studied these things, to be respected. I'm not saying that we worship them, but I mean, because I cannot take a pregnant woman to a pastor for surgery, then I should also respect these people, the Dr. Mukwanas, who have studied this book. So they need to educate us, like they have always done, to remember that you're not just reading a spiritualized talk, but you're reading a humanized talk. Humanized to mean it has a society, it has a history, it has a culture, it has a stage of revelation. I submit.
Thank you. Pedson, happy now with that response?
Of course, just the time is gone, but
Oh, there's 3 minutes. You can disagree in there's 3 minutes.
me, I of course disagree when Peter says that God is attacking the other gods, but who is suffering? It is the human beings who are suffering, who are losing their firstborns. So if God is fighting with other gods, why is it that the battle or the affected people are these people who are actually suffering? So in that's the same context that where Msazi was bringing it, if God can kill firstborns, then what is his moral authority to tell people not
Just
to kill?
remember Brenda.
Yeah.
Hey, my Brenda. Actually, my Brenda starts from there.
I'm done. Just I've just responded to the example Peter was giving.
Okay, Nansha, can you speak? I hope you can. Your network has plagues like the ones in the Bible. Nansha, we can't hear you. Yeah, apologies. Because of time, who can respond to Pedson?
Chair, I'm here.
Okay, yes, Dr. Mukwana, please.
Don't agree with Peter.
Nansha, we can't hear you, sorry. But we have only 2 minutes to go. Dr. Mukwana, go ahead, please.
Yes, Chair. What more authority does a pot have to ask the potter why the potter is making it and breaking it? And that's why I said once you get God wrong, you got everything in life wrong. God is the creator. Nobody has the moral authority to ask him why he has ordered the killing of the other. Just as a pot cannot ask the potter, why have you made me and then broken me? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Isaac, those are the questions Mrs. was asking. So did God create us to kill us and do anything that he wants to do on us?
The short answer is no.
No,
But
because that question shows that he has still not understood me. Let me take him back to real life. What more authority does a pot have to ask the potter why is he molding and breaking? If you understand that analogy, then you can understand the other.
Okay, I guess we can come back next Monday and continue that. This is all we had time for. It's 8 o'clock. Typically, we keep time here. But welcome everybody. Every Monday between 6 and 8 p.m. we're here. If you have questions about life, about God, religion, faith, if you're an atheist, if you're an agnostic, if you're a believer, if you're a doubter, welcome everybody. We believe that we're all better for it when we discuss these matters. We sharpen each other. Gospel Ninja, my time is up, but I'll give you 1 minute, okay?
Oh,
Because we started late.
sorry. I just want to ask the question. When the gods are fighting, why don't they go fight alone and leave the people? Because it looks like when the gods fight, the people suffer. And
Yes.
yeah, but that's what he was saying. And this is not an accusation only to the Christian God, who seems to be a constant feature in all those wars where people suffer, but also to the other gods. But the context should be that these battles that go on are battles for allegiance. But again, it's also it's also hard to even imagine that there is even a battle or a war going on, because the others are not going to win. The others are not going to win. But his concern is about the people who suffer. Often it is because of their allegiance. You see, when there is a war between the Philistines and the Israelites, it is David comes and says, who are these uncircumcised Philistines that are disrespecting our God? Similarly, when Goliath is coming to fight the Israelites, he wants to win that battle and win it for his gods. When Babylon attacks Jerusalem and takes Joachim and everything, he plunders the temple as a disrespect to the God of Israel, and then gets the vessels which are sacred and takes them to his own Babylonian temple. Not that they may be of any use, but just to desecrate them, to just show that his gods are greater. At the end of the day, the people have to choose which God they pay allegiance to. People will die because bagamba enjovu zirwana obusubi bukola bubonabona and abantu si busubi. People are not busubi. But in this case, the battle that is on has implications. That's why the language of greatest, our God is greatest, our God is greater, our God is stronger, is a testament of we have seen the others. They are unable to be like this one. He's a triumphant, victorious, consuming. The language points to that there's no other like this one. So yes, people will die, and indeed people have died, but often on the losing side. There are people, Israelites, who have died when they are born into
Raymond, we need to summarize. Our time is up. Sorry.
Okay. When you read the historical books like Samuel or Kings, when the Israelites went out to battle, do you know what happened to them? They would die in numbers badly. It's not God who lost, it's them. Whenever he sent them out, he would say, I have given them and their king and everything into your hands. And they would go confident knowing together and they would win. The others would fall in big numbers. So the idea is that one God has to win, and for that God to win, the people who subscribe or affiliate to the other God, why? Because their God is judged.
Thank you, Raymond. Because of time, we're going to stop here, but Petson, come back next Monday. We can continue this discussion. I want to thank all of you for joining in. Like I was saying earlier, please feel free to come back any Monday, 6 to 8 p.m. East African time. The recordings are normally uploaded to YouTube, so you can find them there if you miss them, if you miss the live, discussion here. Yeah, see you again next Monday. But on Thursday, we'll have a social topic about a topical issue that we'll communicate. Thank you very much. God bless and keep you until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Which God?